Hello and welcome back to my channel. If this is your first time here, hi, I'm Cassidy. If it's not, thanks for always tuning into my video. Today we are on episode 4 or whatever. I'm filming them in an order, but I never know when they're coming out. So we have the most surprising and the most disappointing books today. I'm doing them all together. Like, you're getting both of them. I'll go through my surprising and then I'll go through my disappointing. I'll have it time-stamped below so that you can skip over whatever if you don't want to see it. And I will say that on these lists, there will be books with any type of star rating. It has nothing to do with the star rating. It's about my experiences with a book. It's with whether I was like not expecting to love a book and ended up loving it, and whether I was expecting to love a book and ended up not loving it as much as I wanted to. That's it. It's not about like the books I disliked the most or anything. That's a previous video that's already gone up. But let's start with my most surprising. And I think the most surprising for me ended up being Satan's Affair by H.D. Carlton. These aren't in any order, but this one really, really shocked me. For this one, I was reading this. I read this for Smut Den. And I was reading it and reading and reading it. And me and Mel were reading it at the same time. It was like, ended up being an impromptu buddy read during Smut Den. And I was like, holy crap. I think at one point we're live sprinting and we both go, why are we still reading this? Like, this is so weird and out there and like I can't see it getting higher than like a 2-star. Like, why am I still reading this? We read for 30 minutes, came back, and both said, holy cow, this book is incredible. There's a twist that I normally don't like, a big shock value twist, but the twist is so good, and you can see the setup, but I feel like I just was completely, like, unknowing about it until it hit, and then I was like, oh, that all makes sense, and now I, like, love what I read. And so this book just surprised me. Like, it full-on surprised me, because I was like, this book's gonna be a terrible book, and then all of a sudden I loved it, and I recommend it now, and I want more people to read it. It's like horror erotica, which is interesting. It is a novella that happens within Haunting Adeline, so the author has a duology, Haunting Adeline and Hunting Adeline. Within the duology, you see this scene, but this scene has its own novel. I recommend reading Satan's Affair before you read Haunting Adeline. I think that because you see the scene happen in Haunting Adeline, the novella, like Satan's Affair, has much more impact and is a much more surprising and interesting read when you read it first. But you might feel like I did and be like, oh my god, this book is terrible, and then all of a sudden be like, oh my god, this is the greatest book ever. So yeah, I really am shocked that I loved that one so much. That one came out of left field and like shocked me in the head. Another one that shocked me was Where the Drowned Girls Go by Shauna McGuire. This is in the Wayward Children series. The reason this shocked me is that I hated the first book and was not ever expecting to like a book in this series, specifically a book that is with the children in our regular world as much as I did. So although I ended up liking the second book, I learned pretty quickly as I read it that I always liked the books where they were exploring a new world more than I liked the books that happen on Earth. But Where the Drowned Girls Go ended up being my favorite in the series. It happens on our planet. It is at the school, and I really adored it, and I had a really fun time with it. So I think that shocked me, because one, I hated the first book in the series, and two, I just was constantly expecting to not like the ones that happened on Earth, like in the school. So I was shocked when one came out, and I was like, oh, I actually did like this one, and it happens at the school. A surprising one also was From Below. I talk about this in my Worst Books of the Year video, that up until From Below, I thought that ghost stories were a no-no for me. I ended up always preferring horror books, thriller books that were action-driven. There's a creature, something literal coming after you, scaring you. The ghosts and the haunting stories just weren't working for me at this time. I don't believe in ghosts myself, so I think that has a big element to it. My favorite horror movies tend to be like slashers and stuff over the paranormal hauntings, because I just don't find them as creepy. From Below shocked me because I wasn't expecting to like a ghost story so much. What I do think I learned I like, though, which is similar to movies, I feel the same way. I just don't enjoy a ghost story that is a ghost you never see, a ghost that's just haunting someone. I like ghost stories where something tangible ends up happening. So within, like, let's talk movies so that I'm not spoiling a book. Like the Ouija movies, one of the kids always gets possessed by the ghost, which makes the ghost more tangible. I like that rather than just like a haunting that's done by a ghost. And I think From Below taught me that, and has taught me that I can look for those in books. And it surprised me because I wasn't expecting to like it. Like, I was expecting to like The Cavern and Into the Drowning Deep that were tangible horror books. I was not expecting to like a paranormal ghost story horror book when I read it in that vlog, and I did, and it changed things for me. The next one is Small Miracles, which I can hold up. Let's put my cozy coffee down and hold up the book for you. Small Miracles by Olivia Atwater. This made it onto my top indie, and it surprised me. It is a cozy fantasy, and up until this point, I would have told you I don't like cozy fantasy. Like, it's just not for me. Not for me in the slightest. This one shocked me, and I liked it. And I still don't know if I'm a cozy fantasy kind of gal, but I think maybe the right ones will work for me, and I'm more willing to try them than I ever have been. Because the humor in this, the fun parts of this really worked for me. The sin counter worked for me. Seeing the small sins worked for me. The characters, although lacking in some ways, worked for me. And this one really surprised me just because I was not expecting to like this, enjoy this book. I thought this was going to be the worst book I read for SPFBO Cassidy's version, and it ended up being pretty close to the top for me. So I'm shocked about this one. I enjoyed this one. The next one is Mary by Nat Cassidy. There's a lot of horror books on this. There's a lot of books outside of my own comfort zone. Not necessarily fantasy books, because oftentimes I don't think I'm going to ever love a book that's not fantasy. I'm expecting to love fantasy books. But Mary is a horror book, and what made me think I wasn't going to like this is the isolation of our character. This is a book that happens within our main character's head. It is very much about the character's feelings, a character's interpretations. It is not about everything else going on. And as I just said, I prefer a more action-driven horror, things like that. This really was about the psychological aspects of our character. There is action in this book, and the action does happen later on in the book, but it's a long book, and the first 50% is very much about our character and the horrors of being a woman getting old. And that was a very interesting experience for me, and something I didn't think I was gonna like. I tend to not like when a character is very isolated by themselves. I like my characters to interact a lot with more characters on the outside, see them go out in public and do things and talk to the neighbors. I tend to like that. I want there to be more than one main character in my stories. But this is very much about Mary. It's Mary's story, and the things Mary goes through as a woman, I think, is what worked for me. I thought it was very interesting to play on the horrors of a woman going through menopause, and it's something we all have to go through. It's something we're all terrified of, and I thought it was a very interesting story. I thought it was done really well, and it's written by a man, and he does it better than I could, for sure. I really enjoyed this one, and it shocked me so much that I enjoyed it. And the next book on this list is There Are No Saints by Sophie Lark. Until this point, when I read this in the year, I would have told you I'm not a romance girly. Like, fantasy romance every once in a while works for me, but I'm still in it for the fantasy elements more than the romance elements. Then I read this book, and I said, gosh darn it, give me the romance. I do still like a romance with plot. I want there to be discussions, and I'm definitely a dark romance girl, not a contemporary romance girl. I don't want the rom-coms as much. I want the dark, gritty, stabby stabs. That's why I liked serial killer romance. Satan's Affair shocked me as a book. There Are No Saints shocked me as a genre. The fact that there was a book out there that was a romance book that I can like is so shocking. And it opened up a new world for me. It opened up a new love for me. I tried a lot more dark romance this year. I read Satan's Affair because of There Are No Saints. I read There Are No Saints, and then I went to Mel and Rye and said, can we do Smut Den? This is an idea. Can we do it? And until that point, if I had never read There Are No Saints, we would have never gotten a smut den. There would have been something similar, but it would not have been the genre that it ended up being, because I read it and said, I think I can do it. I think that this is a genre I want to explore. And it opened up a lot more things, which ends up being the next surprising book for me this year was Savage Lover by Sophie Lark. This one surprised me just because most people dislike it the most and ended up being my favorite in the Brutal Birthright series that I've read so far. I have stopped at this one. I haven't continued, but I wasn't expecting to like this one just because most of the people I know who read the Brutal Birthright series, this is one of their least favorites. And for me, it really worked for me. I liked the NASCAR driving. I liked the heist. Again, I liked the plot that happened within it. And I think that's what a lot of people dislike, is they're here for the romance, not the plot. And the plot worked for me. And the romance was secondary, and I liked that. I'm looking for books like that. I want there to be a story and then romance there too. I want romance to be a heavy focus, but I do want there to be a bit of a plot. And yeah, so those are my most surprising. Let's move on to my most disappointing. I made sure there was equal amounts of most surprising and most disappointing, but I didn't like pick a number, but I think there's 7 of each. My most disappointing, let's start with Jade City. Sadly, Jade City was a book that I really wanted to love, and I just didn't. It's a story that missed a mark for me somewhere. I still enjoyed the story. Like, I think I gave Jade City 4 stars, but I was expecting it to be a new favorite, so I was disappointed that it wasn't. There's something within these stories that is missing for me. I've since read Jade War 2. I haven't read Jade Legacy, but there's just something that is not clicking for me. There's something that I just can't connect to that doesn't work for me. There's so many amazing elements in this story that I think I should love, but there's just something that's missing. And for me, I think it might be a character connection. I'm just not attached to the characters the way I want to be. Jade City was just very disappointing for me. It's a great book. I will be recommending it. I can't wait to finish the series, but I am sad that I didn't love it. Like, I'm sad the passion wasn't there for it. I have the next book. The next mixed disappointing is literally disappointing for the exact same reason. It is Sword of Kaigen by M.L. Wong. This was a story that I read and I said, oh, that's supposed to be hard-hitting, that's supposed to be hard-hitting, that's supposed to be hard-hitting. And I saw all those moments that people talk about, making them cry, making them emotionally attached, but I didn't feel it. It was a story that I read and appreciate, but I was so sad I didn't love it. Like, I was so sad because, like, I wanted to love it. I wanted those moments that I saw that I was like, oh, that should be breaking my heart right now. I wanted it to break my heart, and it just didn't, which left me disappointing. Sword of Kaigen, I don't think I told anyone what any of these are about, is a standalone about a world where, it's in our world, I guess, kind of, where there's this country that hasn't caught up with the rest of society. It's very much stuck in historical ages, like swords, but there's also a magic system. We're watching colonialism come and try to, like, take over their land, essentially, and it is a heartbreaking story. For many, just wasn't for me, which left me a little disappointed. The next on this list is Painted Red by St. Abby, and for this one, I was very disappointed in the ending. This is a series, it's the last book of 5 novellas, so it's essentially, you can read it in one bind up, and I pretty much read them back to back, which it feels like one book, but the last novella, Painted Red, left me very unfulfilled, which left a very disappointing black hole in my body. I thought this story was so fun. Again, it's a romance, kind of. I think the main points of this story is the serial killer's backstory and the reason that you root for that serial killer. Because this is a romance about a serial killer who ends up meeting someone, falling in love, and not realizing it's the cop that's on their case, and then obviously the cop is falling in love with the serial killer, doesn't realize it's the serial killer it's trying to hunt down, and you just see it, like, expand from there. The thing with this one over, like, There Are No Saints is that this is a serial killer who you are taught to root for. You are told their reasoning whys, you understand the reasonings as the story goes on, and it makes you want to also kill all these people. But the ending of this just felt like not realistic to our characters. Specifically, that prologue I hated, but then also I felt like there was a really big plot hole that just didn't get summed up for me, and something I was really interested in and trying to figure out the entire book, so I was left with, like, a void in me when I didn't get a reasoning behind that thing. And I kind of get why it wouldn't bother people. Like, if you weren't as attached to that, like, it was a small thing that I just attached onto. If you weren't attached to that, it wouldn't matter to you. And for most people, it doesn't. But for me, I was just, like, left wanting more. Like, I was left being like, that doesn't make sense. So it did kind of bring down my love of the story. But those 5 novellas are incredible, and they are something I recommend to people. If you haven't read the Mind F series, definitely try it out. It's a wonderful experience. It's so much fun. It's a good buddy read too. I buddy read it with my friend, and we had a heck of a time theorizing and rooting for people and being like, oh my god, it's such a good time. The next on this list is Valor by John Gwynne. This is the second book in the Faithful and the Fallen series. Malice was on the best of my year list, and then I read Valor recently. I waited a really long time, and I was just very much left disappointed by how much I didn't love this. I still gave it 4 stars. Let me tell you, like, I still thought this was incredibly written and a great book, but because of how much love I had for Malice, I was expecting this to be an easy 5 stars. Easy, I was expecting to want to sit down and read the whole rest of the series right away, and that just didn't happen for me. I had a lot of issues getting reconnected, which could have been my own fault for letting it wait so long. I didn't love where the story went in some points. I feel like it had a little bit of middle book syndrome, but for me it was just very disappointing. Even though it's incredible and I gave it 4 stars and I still highly recommend it, I was just disappointed because I thought it was going to be a 5 stars. So that like 1 star left me being like, I wish it was a 5 star. So that's all. I don't have a lot to say about this. Malice is incredible. If you're looking for an epic fantasy, try the Faithful and the Fallen series. The next book on this list is Upgrade by Blake Crouch. This one makes me sad because this one is very disappointing, but because I didn't like it. This isn't one where like I liked it but was just disappointed because I wanted to like it more. This is one of the ones on this list where I ended up giving this book a 2 star. Like I didn't vibe with it. It didn't work for me. Dark Matter and Recursion by Blake Crouch are some of my ultimate favorite books. I adore them. I read them both 5 stars. There's some of, like, if I can scream from the heavens for people to read them, I tell people to read them. So I was so excited that Blake Crouch had another sci-fi thriller book coming out, and Upgrade just didn't scratch that itch for me. Like, it just didn't do it. I just didn't vibe with it. It didn't have the elements I liked, and I think a lot of people didn't vibe with it as much as the others. So I just felt very disappointed, very sad that this wasn't what I wanted it to be, but that's okay. I'm still excited to read more from Blake Crouch, and I hope his next one will be a hit for me. Next one is The Last House on Needless Street by Katrina Ward. Another one I just didn't like. I prefer the disappointing reads that are like, I still like them, but I just wanted to love them. When talking about them later, The Last House on Needless Street just wasn't what I thought I was getting, and I think that's a big issue. I found it to be more of a psychological thriller than a horror. I knew the twist really, really early on. The first thing I say pretty much made sense with the twist and was a prediction for the twist. Like, I texted Mel really early on saying, this is this, and I just didn't feel like a lot of it worked for me, mostly because I think when people tell you what this book is about, they tell you one thing, and I really wanted one of those things, and I thought it was a really cool, unique take and add to a story, and I don't get those things technically, but I get why people say you get it. It's really hard to tell you why this book didn't work for me without spoilers. Thrillers are hard like that. It just didn't work for me, and I really, really wanted it to. I know both Lexi and Mel adored it, and I wanted to adore it with them, but I didn't. But yeah, I was just kind of bored in it. Other than that, though, got nothing else to say. And the last book on this list I can hold up, is Voice of War by Zach Argyle. This is one of the indies that is buzzing right now. It's going around like crazy. It's everyone's favorite. Didn't work for me, sadly. I had a lot of questions. I couldn't understand the characters. For me, I think a lot of it has to do with our ideas and ideals in life and our passions not lining up. For me, I don't really want kids. I'm not a parent, and I don't really want kids. Their struggles of parenthood, although probably beautiful, just didn't work for me. I mean, I had questions about them too, because I just didn't think that it's something I would have felt and related to, even if I was a parent, some of their decisions that they make. But that is something in parenthood, you make your own decisions and everyone disagrees with them. But for me, it was something that really didn't work for me in the book. The magic system didn't really work for me because I had too many questions about it. It was just another story that I critically read in a way that made probably my enjoyment go down because I had too many questions for it, and I didn't have a character to get behind it all. So it didn't work for me, sadly. I really, really wanted to love this one. Like, I had been saving out on this one for a really long time because everyone talks about it and loves it. So I really, really, really wanted to adore it. But for me, it didn't work. I am one of the select few, though. Most people adore it, especially in the indie community. Just didn't work for me. There you have it. Those are my most surprising and most disappointing books of the year. This is always an interesting list. I think the most surprising are books that really impacted me this year, to be honest, this year. Like, I have a lot of books that changed my reading. Things I thought I liked or disliked happened within these lists. And the disappointing is just a sad, sad list because they're books that you wish you loved. I mean, obviously I wish I loved every single book, but these are books that really hit me that I wish I loved. And, like, lots of them, like, for Voice of War, for me, I saw the potential. I saw so much potential in this. So that's, I think, why it hits so hard, is, like, you see the reasons why people love them, and I just didn't love them, and it's so hard hitting. Let me know down below your most surprising or your most disappointing read of the year, and if you're surprised by any of these, let me know down below. If you're not feeling chatty though, and you'd like to leave me an emoji just to say you were here, leave me a mermaid emoji. And then if you'd like to connect with me on other platforms, my Bookstagram, my Book Twitter, my Goodreads, and my Patreon, all linked in the description bar below. Have yourselves an absolutely remarkable day. I'm glad that video's over. Whew. The emotions I go through during this video. A lot.